The Stimson Center, a major US-based think tank, published a report on emerging trends in the greater Mekong sub-region's power sector on June 2017. The sub-region includes Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, Myanmar, and parts of China. According to the report, GMS countries which once were net power importers or power neutral will likely shift to net exporters as they significantly increase domestic capacity. Second, price of non-hydropower renewables is globally dropping more quickly than anticipated, making these sources of power generation competitive with traditional resources like large-scale hydropower and fossil fuels. Third, fossil fuel and hydropower externalities such as air pollution, climate change effects, and a range of social impacts produce political pressure, increasingly forcing changes in the type, location, and size of new power plants. And finally, innovations in energy transmission and distributed grid structures are disrupting traditional infrastructure and utilities models, both globally and in the GMS. The report indicates that those emerging trends provide significant opportunities for Vietnam to diversify its energy sources and reduce carbon emissions, thus ensuring sustainable development. Hello and welcome to Sharing Vietnam. In our program today, we will have a conversation with Ms. Courtney Weatherby, an analyst from the US-based Henry Stimson Center. She will share with us insights into the new trends of power development in Vietnam as well as the greater Mekong sub-region. So hello, Courtney. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Happy to be here.
First of all, could you give us an overview of Henry Stimson Center and your work in Vietnam so far?
Yes, so the Henry Stimson Center is a think tank based in Washington, D.C. It's about 26 years old, and it has been focusing traditionally on non-traditional security and development issues. So Stimson started focusing on nuclear non-proliferation, mostly in India and Pakistan, and has since expanded its focus. And we now have 12 or 13 programs covering regional programs like our Southeast Asia program, the East Asia program looking at China, as well as functional programs that look at issues of environmental security all around the world. We've focused for the last 2 years or so increasingly on Vietnam, both because Vietnam's Mekong Delta is receiving many of the most significant impacts from hydropower and other development projects upstream, but also because Vietnam has a sort of unique leadership opportunity in the region to influence the development of hydropower and other energy and infrastructure projects because of Vietnam's role as a country with growing energy demands and slowly but steadily increasing foreign direct investment in neighboring countries. So Vietnam is really has a significant opportunity, if the political support exists domestically, to play more of a leadership role on sustainability issues in the region.
Could you give us some analysis of the development of Vietnam's power production in recent years and the types of power production that Vietnam has been relying on?
Yeah, Vietnam has one of the highest rates of annual demand growth for electricity in the region and even globally. In recent years, it's been between 10 and 12% most years. Vietnam's installed capacity right now is about 34,000 megawatts. That's going to more than triple through 2030. Vietnam currently relies for almost 50% of its power coming from hydropower, almost all of that produced domestically. And then second after that is coal, with 22% of its production coming from coal. There are other sources as well. Natural gas, of course, supplies some, and we're starting to see very small amount of renewables. There's some investments in solar and wind that are starting to get off the ground, but overall, Vietnam's energy mix is very traditional. Moving into the future, however, we know that's going to change. Vietnam's hydropower percentage is going to drop because there's really not much more capacity that can be added domestically for hydropower. And so coal is going to be the biggest beneficiary of Vietnam's high electricity demand growth. It's going to expand and take over essentially the percentage that hydropower now fills at almost 50%. Natural gas is going to expand, and renewables are going to expand, which is an important shift. Until very recently, renewables are a very small portfolio.
What do you think of the unwanted consequences of the reliance on traditional power plants in Vietnam in recent years?
The main challenge with continuing the traditional mix of fossil fuels and hydropower is that increasingly they're recognized as dirty. Any fossil fuel, whether it's coal, natural gas, or oil, even with modern technology, it has carbon emissions. There's air pollution. It impacts global warming, but it also impacts the local health quality and can impact agricultural areas as well if it's not mitigated carefully. At the same time, we're starting to see the costs of those technologies rise, even not accounting for financial costs from air pollution and climate change, needing to integrate new technology to help scrub some of the dirty pollution from the coal, and just because of imports and the global coal market shift. For Vietnam, the price of coal will almost double into the future. At the same time, hydropower is increasingly known to have negative impacts. Mekong Delta is probably the area where the impacts are felt the strongest, with the slowdown of water coming from dams in Laos and China upstream, impacting salinity, which of course impacts agriculture in one of the most productive regions in the world, but definitely in Vietnam, with the Delta producing nearly 50% of Vietnam's rice production, and also a significant portion of its aquaculture, fruit, and other agricultural products. So the impacts of dams can't be understated, particularly when they're developed in a cascade. Because they'll have overcapacity in that area as well. So in the short to outdated
A dialogue on emerging trends in the GMS power sector and their impacts on Vietnam took place in Hanoi on June the 19th, 2017. Participants included researchers from the Stimson Center, representatives from the Vietnam Mekong Committee, and domestic as well as international environmental organizations. Delegates focused on the prospect of energy development in Vietnam, particularly the national power production plan until 2030. According to the plan, the number of coal-fired power plants in Vietnam will be more than tripled to over 70 units in 2030. The development goes against the replacement of coal-fired power plants with renewable energy projects around the world and in GMS.
As the cost of coal power is rising, the price of renewables is declining, and they're going to intersect pretty soon. And at that point, a whole new opportunity for sort of off-the-grid solutions, ultra-low impact solutions are possible that Vietnam needs to take advantage of. Now, Vietnam is already the manufacturing base of choice for many companies like General Electric, which produces all of its wind turbines here in Haiphong. So Vietnam has the technical expertise, it's got the business capacity to move in a very large way into renewables. And I think that will almost certainly replace a large portion of the coal.
According to experts, Vietnam needs to reduce its dependence on coal-fired power and increase renewable sources in the national plan. The country is also urged to foster power linkage with nearby countries to get energy at favorable prices from environmentally friendly sources. Experts say Vietnam can play a leading role in GMS power linkage, thus easing the need to build domestic energy plants, cutting prices and reducing carbon footprint of the sub-region. Well, Courtney, you just presented a report on the new trends of energy production in Vietnam and other greater Mekong sub-region countries. So please give us an overview of the new trends.
Yes, so one of the most important trends that is seen on a global scale is the drop in the price of renewables. Until very recently, power planners and business investors all over the world would say that if you're not investing for specific sustainability purposes, most solar and wind investment projects are just too expensive. They're more than double the price of these traditional technologies like hydropower and coal that many countries rely upon. However, in recent years, we've started to see a shift. China has invested a great deal in the production of solar panels and wind parts as well, and so there's overcapacity. There's economy of scale. The price of the components for these projects have dropped. And the price is now very competitive in many areas. India, for instance, just canceled tens of thousands of megawatts of coal projects because they can't compete with solar. And India, like Vietnam and like many other countries here in the Mekong Basin, it struggles with the same need to build out significant capacity, to build it out in a way that's reliable and affordable for a populace that doesn't have much money to spend on electricity, and it's trying to significantly grow its economy. So if India sees that solar and wind are increasingly profitable, that's a great sign for countries here in the Mekong region.
In your opinion, how can Vietnam benefit from the new trends of energy production in the region?
One of the largest benefits for Vietnam from this global price drop in renewables is that it has the opportunity to significantly diversify its electricity supply. Vietnam has a significant opportunity to invest in renewables, not only domestically, where land prices are high and population density is high, but also across the border in Laos and Cambodia. Many of Vietnam's neighbors' resources are very close to the border with Vietnam, and particularly they're close to Ho Chi Minh City, where demand is expected to rise significantly and there's a gap in energy supply. So through imports from neighboring countries, imports that are predicated on a conditionality of being renewable or being non-impactful hydropower, the renewable energy trend also has the opportunity to improve the outcome for Vietnam's Mekong Delta.
What can you say about the shift in the Vietnamese government's attitude and policies towards renewable energy production?
Vietnam has for many years, I think since 2011, already had a policy for feed-in tariff for wind. And just in April this year, a directive came down with a policy on net metering, which essentially allows companies or commercial scale power plants to track how much electricity they're selling into the grid and get paid based on that. And the other major change that the government has recently embraced is a feed-in tariff for solar, which essentially is a set price for solar. There are a few other permissions and policies that were engaged along with those in this directive. But with those in place, a lot of solar investment that had previously been held back because of uncertainty is likely to move forward. So there will be a variety of new case studies and pilot projects coming online in Vietnam now that there is a policy that has been set.
And finally, what are your recommendations for the authorities of Vietnam to maximize the benefits from the new trends of energy production in the greater Mekong sub-region?
One of the major changes that Vietnam can adopt for the future is to use smart grid technology that allows for immediate response to demand, and energy efficiency technologies that help cut down on demand-side management. Those combined with the policies that they've already adopted and perfection of those policies as the impacts on investors become more understood, will likely support a wide-scale build-out here in Vietnam, but also through energy trade with neighbors.
Okay, so thank you very much, Courtney, for your insights, and we look forward to receiving much more helpful research studies from Henry Stimson Center in the coming years.
Thank you. We look forward to sharing our work in the future.
Thank you. Well, that's all for our Sharing Vietnam today. Thank you very much for watching, and see you again next time.